prayer. And actually, we covered connection last month, every single Sunday in the month of April. So we've got the interconnectedness kind of down. And then we rely on spiritual guidance, however we get that. And as we rely on spiritual guidance, we also accept personal responsibility for either following it or not following it, for balancing guidance and making choices. And actually, these two together, spiritual guidance and personal responsibility, are all about freedom. And so that is actually what I'm going to be talking about today. And it's not about following the rules. It's really about leaning into your freedom. So the topic, or my topic today, is what are we free to do? And this little guy up here, you know, how often have we felt this, right? You know, well, I could do this, or I could do this. And just that, knowing that we could make a life-enhancing choice or a life-limiting choice, that is the essence of freedom, right there. So every single choice we make is a free choice. And that, whether we feel it or not, it actually is a free choice. If we feel like we have no choices and we have to go in a particular direction, well, that is a choice. So today, I'm actually going to be talking about freedom and responsibility in 3 wisdom traditions. And the 3 wisdom traditions are exemplified by this absolutely amazing altar, which looks like it has every single wisdom tradition on it, because Marcia has filled it so full with beauty. This is a Marcia altar, so let's give her a round of applause. It's absolutely gorgeous. And it is a absolutely springtime altar with many symbols that we're going to talk about this morning. So the traditions that we're going to talk about are, first of all, Science of Mind. That's where you are, in the Centers for Spiritual Living, which teaches the science of mind. We are also going to be talking about the Eastern Orthodox tradition. This is actually the first time that I have tiptoed into the Eastern Orthodox tradition, because it is Easter. It is their Easter today. It's very late. Usually it's a little bit closer to the Western Easter, but it is Eastern Orthodox Easter today. So Christos Anesti to the Greeks. And does anybody else know Christ is risen in another Slavic language? Just shout it out. One more. And what is that? In what language? Russian. Excellent. Well, good. So anyway, we'll talk more about that. And then, of course, it is Beltane. So we're going to be talking about the ancient earth-based traditions as well. So why are we doing this? Why is this just because Reverend Carol wants to think deeply? But actually, there's another reason. And that is that every spiritual tradition has brought people to God. Every place in the earth, every time, every era, spiritual traditions have brought people to God. And when we examine them in their pure form, we reveal something to ourselves that is a lot like what our founder, Ernest Holmes, found. And that is, they're all the same. They're pretty much all the same. So we are looking at these 3 traditions today with the question, what are we free to do? So are you ready? All right. You're going to feel really good. So this is our teaching symbol from Science of Mind. This is what we're going to do first. Science of Mind. And this is the teaching from page 109 in the textbook. And that is, we are created with the responsibility of limitless, or the possibility and responsibility of limitless freedom, and let alone to discover it ourselves. What this says is that we are created absolutely free, and by our thrashing around with that little devil on this side and that little angel on this side, we learn, if we're paying attention, that we're actually very free to choose just about anything. This is how it continues from this quote in the textbook. On the road to self-discovery, we must be subject to the law of reality, and if in ignorance we violate this law, we must thereby suffer. So this law of reality, this is one of the code words in Ernest Holmes for simply the creative law. And that is what we imagine, especially what we imagine that is a possibility for us with positive anticipation, has a great, great chance of actually occurring or in some form occurring for us. What we look for, we usually find. And if we look for limitations, we also find those. So it is the same law of correspondence that can give us conditions which seem freeing or not. Does that make sense to you? If you choose something limiting, you're free to do that. And you can experience the results of that. And it exemplifies the same law of freedom, that is, if somebody else chooses to think something very positive, uplifting, expansive, beautiful, joyful, loving, peaceful, and they get to experience that. Now, this makes some people angry. And it goes like this. When it's said that we are responsible for the conditions of our life, we all, especially those that haven't been in this philosophy for a long time, go to wait a darn minute. What about a child in a war zone? What about a baby that is born deformed? What about an airplane that goes down? And the anger comes from a very compassionate place. And the compassionate place says this: the suffering of the world should not be put on the shoulders of its victims, especially the little ones, like they're responsible for it. That's what our compassionate heart says. And I don't yet know how to answer that satisfactorily for everybody, but what I am asking us all to do today is to not go to the mysterious extreme and ignore the principle for ourselves. Because that's what it helps us do. If we say, oh no, that is not the way the universe is set up. Because look at all of these suffering people, they didn't choose that. And if we stay there, then we can say to ourselves, I can't help it if my life is a friggin' mess. Because that's not the way the world works. And so what I'm asking us to do in this moment is to go to ourselves, not the extreme, and to concentrate on our own life and our own freedom and our own responsibility so that we can prove this teaching to ourselves, so that we can be free to be, do, have, and serve in ways that are nurturing for our soul and good for the world. And I'm telling you, any simple little foray into a free choice helps everything. So, for example, my daughter, who most of you know, is a college-educated bartender in Manhattan. And she recently vacationed in the tropics. So she came back and she said, I am literally trying to figure out how I can move to Tulum. I want to live on a beach and work in a bar on a beach. So I said, thank God, I said, honey, you are in charge of your own life. You know how to take care of yourself, and you make good choices. You have responsibility for yourself alone, and you are in a time in your life when you are absolutely free. Well, that was the end of that conversation. I mean, she might do that, but that's the truth. And when any soul hears the truth, and I was saying that to myself, you know, I'm free to go to a beach and work in a bar on a beach. I am free to do that. I could figure out what to do with my cats, and I could go and move to a beach, and just thinking about that freedom reminds me that I'm free. I want you to know I freely choose to stay here with you. But maybe these little stories remind you you're free to choose a lot of things that are not on your current trajectory. And that is the teaching of Science of Mind. Let's move to the Orthodox, wonderful, wonderful collection of churches in the East. So this is the Eastern Orthodox Easter, and this is one of their teachings. Being born in the image of God is to possess rationality and freedom. So one of the things that happened with the Orthodox Church that has had its center in Constantinople in the 5th century was that it did not want to come under the jurisdiction of the Pope, of the Catholic Church. They didn't want it so much that they broke away. They created an entirely different Christian church that does not have a Pope because of their delight in their own freedom and their desire to interpret Scripture personally. This is another quote from the teaching. God becomes powerless before human freedom. He cannot violate it since it flows from his own omnipotence. So we are forced to be free. We can pretend we're not free, and that's how we're spending our freedom. Another quote from the teaching, sometimes various holy fathers may have contradictory opinions about a certain question, and where no consensus exists, the individual is free to follow his or her own conscience. Well, that's the truth. That's the truth no matter if somebody tells you you are or not free. We are created that free. We can follow our own conscience whether some organization tells us to or not. We are absolutely free to follow our own conscience. We're free actually to do anything. We are free to move toward or away from the holiness of God. In other words, we are free to seek our real joy that experience teaches me is related to peace, love, and connection, or we are free to seek an imposter joy, the kind of joy that is associated with competition, force, and deception. See, we are free to hold any value. And it is this is how we find our freedom. Because if we hold values that are life enhancing, our life is going to be enhanced. If we hold values that are in competition with somebody else, or we have to win and somebody else has to lose, then we reap that. It is the spiritual principle that like begets like, and we are free to figure out what we put in the equation first. So moving to our third tradition, which is the wonderful earth-based spirituality. And this right here, on the wheel of the year, this is the wheel of the year, right here is Beltane. And here we have a man and a woman dancing the maypole. And here's a little bit of wine and, you know, here little tendrils of nature, and they look like they're having a wonderful time. So the quote from this tradition that I brought to you today is, do what you will and harm no one. This is an ancient saying from, I believe it's the Wiccan tradition. And so what this says is that what Beltane stands for is really a holiday of pleasure. And if you think about it, actually one of the things that I didn't talk about at first, I don't think, is the confluence of calendars. You know, every single religion is based on the calendar of the year. Every single religion is based on when you plant and when you harvest, because the origin of religion was all about persuading the deities to let us live so another generation can be produced. And letting us live so another generation can be produced means that fertility of all sorts has to happen. Fertility in the people, fertility in the lambs, fertility in the land. And so this holiday on May 1st is about letting go of the last vestiges of winter and stepping out in, I mean, this is the perfect May Day. It's like we can take off our sweaters and anything else we want and just go into the beautiful, beautiful sunshine. And if we're just out there, we can feel the sunshine, we can smell the flowers, it's a sensory delight out there. And that's the purpose of Beltane. Flowers are a symbol of Beltane. Fertility rites are a symbol of Beltane. And so we all come from a lineage that also has Calvinism and Puritanism in its wake, which means that pleasure leads you to that little devil on this ear. And if you experience too much pleasure, you are just going to go right down the path to destruction. That's not this tradition. The earth-based tradition is pleasure is a gift from the divine. In fact, one of the sayings from the declaration of the goddess is, all acts of love and pleasure are my rituals. And so you are free to have pleasure. You are free to have any kind of pleasure you want. And especially if you want to do what you want to and harm no one. That's sacred. That's sacred. That's freedom. And so the result of all this is this principle. We are free to choose anything to think, say, and do, bound or unbound by spiritual principle. So this is such a brilliant picture that Reverend Mary found, because you don't know really whether this is spiraling out in unboundedness or whether the same law is spiraling inward to limitation. Because it's the same law, the same spiritual principle that says, it is done unto you as you believe. Wayne Dyer has a book title that is, If You Believe It, You See It. So clearly choosing and clearly deciding is the first step in co-creation. And so of all the possibilities that are in front of you now, what do you choose? If you think about your life being on a trajectory, your life is probably yesterday looked quite a bit like today. And if you stay on the same trajectory, tomorrow will look quite a bit like today. But if you really think about it, out in front of you are infinite futures. Infinite futures. And you can take a step on the path of any single one of those futures that you choose to. That is exercising your particular free choice. And whatever you choose, if you choose to have tomorrow look a lot like today, choose it. And let yourself know that that is the freedom of choice that you are exercising. But now I want to bring in that other principle for this month, which is divine guidance. And this is a part of the what we believe statement from the essay that we're working with all year. This is a very powerful piece of it. We believe in the direct revelation of truth through the intuitive and spiritual nature of the individual, and that any person who lives in close contact with the indwelling God may become a revealer of truth. So what I want to say today is that the revelation of truth is guidance. If in your heart or mind you get this impulse to do something, to be something, to take a step on the path of one of those infinite futures, that is the revelation of truth for you. This is your truth, and you can choose to do it. So we receive the direct revelation by making a habit of spiritual practice. And spiritual practice is in every single class. Spiritual practice is offered to you by every single practitioner who does a prayer for you. You can say, I love what you said. How can I bring this into my life? And they'll give you homework. And that homework is spiritual practice. So this is, in the invocation that I prayed about miracles, if you just listen to me, and I know this is pretty fascinating stuff, but unless you take this and use it in your own life, you won't receive the benefits. So spiritual practice is about opening, asking, setting aside your ego, setting aside the tendency to compare, setting aside the tendency to compete, setting aside the impulses, well, I really want that red car, and setting aside those things and opening to the mind of God and asking the really big questions. One really big question is, what wants to happen here? What wants to happen here? So if you have an intense egoic desire, don't ignore it, but just ask the bigger question. What wants to happen here? Because there is several of those infinite futures out in front of you, several of them. That is the path for the good of all and the harm of none. And that's what you want to be free to choose. One of those paths that is for the good of all and the harm of none. So knowing that there are people here from every single level of spiritual discernment and practice, I'm going to give you a lesson here that is the best beginning lesson and the best advanced lesson. Okay? You don't get much better than this. So this is it. This is not exactly it. The golden rule up there is it. This is from Aesop. No act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. And of course, the golden rule is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So this, by the way, is in every single spiritual tradition. And so in that egoic desire of, I really want the red car, or I really want my grandchildren to call me, or whatever it is that you want, and you ask the question, what is for the good of all and the harm of none? You can also ask, what would I want from others? What would I want? And let me give that. Let me do that. So, in conclusion, I don't run into Orthodox priests that often. You recognize them because they always wear or usually, I recognize them by the long black robe and the big cross. And they don't have the white collar usually. So I was at Costco getting gas. And this was so God, because I scooped into the line that I wasn't in. I took that step into another trajectory at the Costco gas stop. And right in front of me this week was a young Orthodox priest who was putting gas in his car. And I said, "Oh, it's about your Easter time, isn't it?" And he looked at me and he said, "Are you Orthodox?" And I said, this is what I said, "No, I'm a metaphysical minister, so I know all the calendars." And he actually did not really know what to say. He said, "You know all the calendars?" And I said, "Well, yeah, they all kind of say the same thing because it's all the same God." And then he didn't say anything else either. You know, he kind of put his gas in, and I thought, well, you know, that's my truth. My truth is it's the same God, and it's the same lesson. I'm pretty sure, if on one of my infinite paths of my future, I fell in love with an Orthodox person and they wanted me to go to Orthodox church, I could, and I could get the same lessons that I'm telling you because it's the same thing. We're all here on this earth plane with the same calendar, with the same God, with the same mechanism of thought, accessing the same mind of God, no matter what our denomination is. And our religion is do it yourself. Listen to your own spiritual guidance and make your free choice. That is what religion is about. That is what spiritual growth is about. So, Christos anesti. That's Christ is risen. You say back to me, Alithinos anesti. That means indeed he has risen. So that, and there is Christos right there on the altar from the Greek Orthodox. So that's the morning. Happy Beltane, everybody. So our spiritual principles, pretty good here, are we are completely free, bound or unbound by spiritual principle. And the next one is spiritual wisdom at its most pure is universal. And the practice that you can take and use in your own life, and I want you to, is this. Prove your freedom for yourself. Go home a different way. And just say to yourself, I'm proving my free choice to myself by going home a different way or sitting in a different spot. Todd is sitting house left today instead of house right. And so it's like, oh my God, it's a new world. So, so let's pray and know our freedom. So sitting in our expansive heart today, knowing in some way that freedom is ahead of us. No matter how we have used spiritual principle in the past to feel bound, we can choose a different path today. And so, starting with not maybe, I'm going to quit my job and try something else, but simply exercising our freedom. What am I free to love that has never occurred to me before? What am I free to love? And who am I free to love that I might not have loved before? What new endeavor am I free to try? I am free to try painting. I am free to try baking. I am free to try ceramics. I am free to try podiatry. I am free, whatever. I may not choose to, but I am free to. What is something pretty small that I can do today to prove freedom to myself? Any little thing. What am I free to do? Then I go do it. Then I say, see, I am free. I am free. And then we can move to bigger things. Where am I free to see peace? And maybe it's that war-torn country where the children seemingly do not have choice, but I have choice to see peace there and there and there and there, to see abundance and nurturing and caring there and there and there, to see right action for all there and there, to see connection one unto another there and there and there, to see the world that works for everyone, because I must see it, and then it will be here. So much good, so much freedom, and so much responsibility. We are literally co-creators with God of this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful world, the northern hemisphere of which is now in full-blown spring. Blessed be.